Excellence High School, the interview for Alejandra Perez.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Alejandra. If hired, how do you plan to build a safe, productive, and affirming learning environment?
I believe the key in building a safe, productive, and affirming learning environment is a well managed classroom in which positive relationships are built, autonomy over lessons and discipline is encouraged, and students have clarity over what is expected of them.
Can you explain why positive relationships are important?
Yes, I can. Positive relationships create a safe environment. And a student who feels safe is more likely to engage in class activities or discussions versus a student who does not feel safe and instead occupies their time worrying over emotional or physical harm that may come their way.
Please provide two examples on how you will create positive relationships in your classroom.
One way is by greeting my students with a smile as they walk in. The author of Upgrade Your Teaching, Understanding by Design Meets Neuroscience, emphasized the importance of smiling and talking in an uplifting voice because the teacher's mood determines the mood of the students. Excuse me. Saying something like, "Good morning, Mason. It's nice to see you today." And then once everyone walks in, I would make a general greeting to the classroom, something like, "Good morning, class. It's a beautiful day to learn some history." Or, "Good morning, class. Welcome back to Social Studies, where we study history to understand why things are the way they are today." I've actually been brainstorming a slogan for my classroom so that after saying it every day, my students can repeat it with me and therefore creating a positive relationship with my students because we both say the same greeting every morning. I also believe that smiling and engaging with my students before starting the lesson shows that I care about them. And according to an article I read on culturally responsive classroom management strategies, students make behavior decisions based on their perception of whether or not the teacher cares about them. That was one example. Another example I have is to create positive relationships. To create positive relationships is by getting to know the students better. I would set time aside either at the start or end of the week to ask students to share a happy story. And a happy story could be something that happened during the week or that's going to happen in the weekend that's coming. Sharing these personal stories allows students to learn more about each other, creating positive relationships, which is also known as building community. And as a bonus, learning about my students will allow me to incorporate their outside lives into my lesson plans as well.
Earlier, you said that building a safe, productive, and affirming learning environment involves autonomy over lessons and discipline. Can you please explain?
Yes, I believe in order for the classroom to be productive, the teacher must foster personal responsibility and self discipline. A way to do this is to allow students to work together to come up with classroom behavior expectations. With guidance from me, students would write the classroom norms, the classroom rules on a poster board and sign the poster agreeing to abide by the classroom rules. I feel students are more inclined to follow rules that they write themselves instead of having to follow rules that the teacher enforced without student consent. According to the article I mentioned earlier on culturally responsive classroom management, the goal of classroom management is to create an environment in which students behave appropriately from a sense of personal responsibility and not from a fear of punishment or for a desire to gain a reward. Therefore, when students create their own rules, they hold each other accountable, and that's what I mean by autonomy and self-discipline. What I mean for autonomy over lessons was that I plan to ask students what content they would like to be covered. This is where backwards design plays a huge role. By working backwards, you can ask students for their input on content before creating a lesson plan. According to, I believe it was chapter 1 of the book Upgrade Your Teaching, when you involve students in the lesson planning, they feel heard and are more likely to participate in something they helped create, thus creating a productive classroom.
Can you explain how you will make sure students have clarity over lesson plans?
Clarity over lesson plans means that the students not only understand what they have to do, but most importantly, why they are doing it. Social studies, as much as it saddens me to say this, social studies is not a popular subject. So I feel that in order to build an affirming learning environment, students first need to know why history is important. Before diving into a lesson plan, I plan to inform students of their goals and rationale. Although every lesson will include a rationale for why we are covering certain topics, I also plan to create a small lesson at the beginning of the school year on why history is important. And I don't plan just to say that it's because we learn from the past, or which, I mean, it is true, or that we learn about past civilizations. I want them to know that history is also about learning to make, for example, inferences. And that's a useful tool that they will use every day. Whether you're watching a movie and you make an inference off of what you've been watching, even gossiping with friends, what they're telling you, the evidence you see, you make an inference on what kind of person that is. Another example of something important that the students should know about history, of why I learn about history, is that history teaches you how to distinguish a bad source from a reliable source. And that's another useful tool that students can use in daily life, like when reading Twitter posts, anything online. Students have to learn how to figure out if it is a valid source.
Thank you. Last question. Can you explain how your plans contribute to a culturally responsive and affirming learning environment?
Yes, as mentioned earlier, I believe it is important to develop positive relationship with students because this is how you get to know and understand the different backgrounds of your students. For example, learning that a student is being raised by a single parent will allow me to incorporate examples of single parent students into my lesson plan so that that student feels included. Usually, the stereotype is that kids have both a mother and a father, and those that only have one parent kind of feel left out. Well, not in my classroom. I would take the knowledge I've gathered from them to make sure that they feel included into the classroom. Another example that I gave earlier about students coming up with classroom rules also contributes to creating a culturally responsive environment because it is an opportunity for students to discover that different cultures sometimes have different perspectives on what is considered good behavior or bad behavior. When we acknowledge these differences and learn to work with them, we're actually creating an affirming learning environment in which students feel safe, comfortable, supported, and respected enough to focus on their learning. Thank you.